How's it going, everyone? This is Adam from Slurv, Ship My Money on DraftKings, and I'll be breaking down today's pitching slate for May 18th. As usual, I'll start with my cash plays on DraftKings and FanDuel, and then move into the riskier GPP options that I like. Today is it's different than yesterday. All the good pitchers went yesterday. Today there's, a few higher tier pitchers in good matchups, and then it's kind of pretty barren once you get down into like the middle and cheaper tier pitchers. So, today is a day where it's going to be tough to really find pitching value that, has upside, for tournaments. But starting with cash, Johnny Cueto is my number one cash play today. He's priced at $11,900 on DraftKings, $10,900 on FanDuel, and he's matched up with a Padres team, that's just really bad against righties all year. Last time he faced them, he threw a complete game with, I believe, 11 strikeouts. This game's in San Diego, so, it's a pitcher's park, and I just think he's a really safe option today, so I really like him on both sites in cash. Today's a day where if I play cash, it'll probably be on FanDuel just so I can roster Cueto and not worry about anybody else. But if I do look to other pitchers, I don't mind David Price on DraftKings at $10,600. He looked a lot better in his last start against Houston. Dustin Pedroia noticed something in his mechanics that he fixed, and he came out against Houston and had more velocity than he had in his previous starts. His control was better. His walks were down. And, he still had his really good swing and miss stuff that he's actually carried all season. So I think he's pretty safe because the Royals haven't been hitting well lately. They have some injuries to their lineup, and, it's just really hurt them. Their strikeout rate has gone up to about 20% over the last 2 weeks, which is really weird for the Royals. And one thing Price has been good at all year is even when he struggled, he's been getting strikeouts and getting a lot of swings and misses. Like, a lot of his struggles were just due to getting unlucky. He had a really high BABIP so far this season. And even against Houston, his BABIP was, I believe, 397, but they weren't hitting the ball hard. So, it was just him getting unlucky. So I think he's a pretty safe option. I'd prefer to wait and let him make like one more good start before I play him in cash games. But on a slate that is just kind of, doesn't have a lot of good options today, I think he's in play. And then on DraftKings, Taijuan Walker at $7,100 against the Orioles, I think, is in play for cash games. Obviously the Orioles are a really scary lineup, and the game's in Camden Yards, which is a good place to hit. But Walker's price is just too low. He's been really, really good against right-handed batters so far this season. He has a 1.51 xFIP with a 33% strikeout rate. He also has been getting a ton of ground balls against righties. His ground ball to fly ball ratio against right-handed batters is 1.75 so far this season. And if you look at his pitches, I think it's probably explained because he's throwing his fastball less and he's using his off-speed pitches more. So I think that's probably leading to more ground balls. And that also matches up really well with this Orioles team, who is a really, really good fastball hitting team, but they struggle sometimes with off-speed pitches. So at $7,100, I think Walker is definitely in play as your second starting pitcher for cash because, the Orioles hit for a lot of power, but they also strike out. And I think at $7,100, he just has enough strikeout upside that it gives him a pretty nice floor, even if he does give up a couple of home runs to those, right-handed power bats, as long as guys aren't on base. And he also, he's good about not walking people. So I think it's pretty likely that if he does get touched up for a couple of runs, it'll just be, solo home runs from the Orioles. So that's where I'm looking for cash. Moving into GPPs, I think today is interesting just because I think you'll be able to do some stuff from like a game theory ownership perspective. Sorry. I think Cueto will be really highly owned since people target pitchers against the Padres, and he's, the highest priced guy on the board, and there's just a lack of options. So on DraftKings, where John Lackey is $10,900 and priced between Cueto and Price, I think he's a really good GPP option against the Brewers. His strikeout rate this year so far is up to 25.9%, which is far and away, higher than anything he's had lately. But it's backed up with a 12% swinging strike rate. And I was looking at his pitches, and it doesn't seem like he has any more movement on any of his pitches, that I could tell over, normal But one thing I did notice is he's throwing his changeup a lot more. And looking back at his stats through the beginning of last year, he had a 24% strikeout rate against righties. He just had a 15% strikeout rate against lefties. So I think that maybe by throwing his changeup more, he's striking out more lefties now, which is what has driven his overall strikeout rate up from 20 or 21% to 25%, because he probably more effective against lefties now. Against the Brewers, I don't think that really matters anyway, because the Brewers are a really right-handed heavy team, and he's been striking out a lot of righties this year. He struck out a lot of righties last year, and I think he profiles as the kind of pitcher that should do really well against the Brewers, because he comes out and pounds the strike zone. He's got a 68% first strike rate, a 50% percentage of pitches in the strike zone, and the Brewers are a patient team that doesn't swing a lot. They have the lowest swing percentage in the major leagues. They also have the third lowest contact percentage on pitches in the strike zone this season. So I think the way to get strikeouts against the Brewers is, to pound the strike zone early, get ahead in the count, and then they'll have to chase, your pitches off the plate, which, they will. They have a 26% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching this year. It's actually higher than the Padres. And the game's in Miller Park, which is a stadium downgrade for Lackey, but he does get a lot of ground balls. So I'm not too worried about the ballpark for him. And I just really like him as a pivot off of Johnny Cueto, because I expect him to just be much lower owned than Cueto. But he's facing a team that strikes out, just as much, if not more, than the team that Cueto faces, and he's got better strikeout stuff than Cueto does. So I think there's a good amount of the time that he just outscores Cueto in this matchup, and you get a leg up on all those people who paid the extra $1,000 to get Cueto. Similarly, Francisco Liriano is matched up with Atlanta, who is awful against left-handed pitching. So far this season, they strike out 25% of the time. They have a 48 WRC plus. They're just absolutely awful against left-handed pitching. But people have been targeting that. Like, John Neese was 20% owned against the Braves the other day, and everybody knows, it's common knowledge that John Neese is a terrible pitcher, but he was still 20% owned in GPPs. So I expect people to flock to Liriano, who is, a much more capable pitcher. He matches up really well with Atlanta also, because when Liriano gets in trouble, it's because he can't throw strikes. But Atlanta's a very aggressive team. They swing early, they swing often, they swing at pitches out of the strike zone, they swing at everything. And Liriano's got the kind of stuff that if you're chasing him out of the strike zone, you're not going to make contact with it, because he's got really good stuff. So, in a vacuum, he makes a great play. But the thing with him is he's so inconsistent that if he's going to be, 40, 50, or 50% owned or even higher today, you, over the course of a season, are just going to make money by not playing Liriano in those spots, because when he's bad, and he can be bad against anybody. So, assuming he's going to be really highly owned, I would rather just play David Price for, $200 more, or even Lackey, and just hope that he has one of his games where he's not throwing anything close enough to the plate that the Braves will even be tempted to swing. If throughout the course of the day I think that David Price and him are going to be similarly owned, then, I may do something like Lackey and Liriano if I'm paying up for both pitchers. But I'm assuming that he's just going to be higher owned than Price, since Price has had such such a bad season, and Liriano has such a great matchup. So I'm going to look to go to either Price or Liriano, or either Price or Lackey, instead of Liriano, assuming his ownership is going to be through the roof. And then moving down the board a little bit, I think Taijuan Walker is in play for GPPs also. He's just got that matchup with the Orioles, where I think he'll be owned, but not super highly owned. He's just way too underpriced and has a lot of upside at that matchup. But that's about as far down as I want to go for pitching today. I think Adam Wainwright is a little bit interesting at 5,800 on DraftKings, going against Colorado, who, notoriously is much worse outside of Coors Field. But I just don't see anything that makes me think that Wainwright's going to start being good again. The one positive is he has been giving you decent innings at least, 5 to 6 innings even in his bad starts. And that has value, now that his price is all the way down to 5,800. But, today I don't think I want to go there. But out of, the really cheap options, I do think he's the best, just because I'd be really interested in Bolsinger, but he's going to be on a pitch count. He only threw 4 innings in his last rehab start, so I don't want to go there. and then Tropiano is matched up with a very left-handed team. So, like, if you are going to pay down for pitching, I think it's Wainwright, but I have no confidence in actually doing that. Moving on to the stacks I like Toronto a lot at home against Jake Odorizzi. He's a reverse splits fly ball pitcher. He gets hit hard by right-handed bats, gives up a lot of fly balls to him, and the game is in Rogers Center, so you have the Blue Jays righties probably at lower ownership since they haven't been hitting that well lately, and they're facing a righty going up against a guy who gets hit pretty hard by right-handed bats. White Sox lefties against Doug Fister are in play. Anybody who stands at home plate left-handed is in play against Doug Fister whenever he's on the mound. So, I'm definitely interested in them. The Dodgers match up really well with Nick Tropiano. He struggles a lot more against lefties than he does against righties, and the Dodgers have a very lefty-heavy lineup with a lot of power. So that's somewhere that I like a lot. The Rockies against Wainwright. I think I'd rather take the Rockies bats, probably at pretty low ownership since they're on the road, than target Wainwright as a pitcher. So I'll probably have some exposure to that. And then the Cubs in Miller Park, they got shut down yesterday by Chase Anderson, but today they get a really good matchup with Jimmy Nelson, who is really, really good against righties, but struggles a lot with lefties. And a lot of the Cubs' power and good hitters are left-handed or switch hitters. So I think they match up really well with Jimmy Nelson, plus to get the park upgrade to Miller Park. So I think today is a good day, if you're able to afford it, to pay up for those Cubs bats and try and get them at a little bit lower ownership since they burned everyone yesterday in what looks like a better matchup, even though it kind of wasn't because Anderson's a reverse splits pitcher. So that's what I'm thinking for right now. Definitely check into the Slurve chat throughout the day. And I'll have, more thoughts on stuff once I have done some more research and lineups start to come out, so I have more information available. And we'll also have the expert chat today with myself, Max, and Steve. So stop in, listen to that closer to lock, and good luck today, guys.